At my father's birthday dinner, he raised his glass, smiled at the room, then looked at me and said, "You're a burden. Get out of my house." 10 years of loyalty, 10 years of sending every military paycheck home while dodging bullets overseas, and this was how it ended. No honor, no welcome. Just silence as I stood up and left wounded and discarded. I didn't even pack a bag. I took the next bus, headed for my grandfather's farm, thinking I'd find peace, maybe even a little dignity. But the second he saw me on that porch, he didn't just hug me. He told me a truth he'd been carrying for years, one that tore open everything I thought I knew about why my family pushed me away. My name is Zephyr Kane, and this is not just a story about war or betrayal. It's about what you build when everything else breaks. It's about finding out who truly stays when you have nothing left to give. I'm about to share something close to my heart. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reach. It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if you feel something while listening, pain, anger, hope, please hit subscribe. Not just for me, but for every voice out there still waiting to be heard. Your support keeps these stories alive. Growing up in Wichita Falls, Kansas, felt like living under a magnifying glass. Everyone knew everyone and everything looked fine from the outside. Our 2-story house on Maple Grove had white shutters, manicured hedges, and a porch swing that creaked just enough to seem nostalgic. But if you stepped inside, the rot ran deep. My parents, Wyatt and Marla Kane, were the kind who smiled wide at church on Sunday but screamed behind closed doors by Monday morning. And in the middle of it all, there was me, Zephyr Kane, and my little brother Ellis, whose only crime was being born after me. I started wiping Ellis's spit up when I was 10. By 12, I was boiling pasta, cleaning up after our dad's hangovers, and quietly settling unpaid utility bills with the money I earned mowing lawns and tutoring math. While other kids rode their bikes, I was budgeting groceries. Mom would host wine nights with her girlfriends and laugh while wearing dresses bought with my silly little savings jar. Dad talked big about business ventures, yet couldn't keep a job longer than a season. When they argued, it was always about money, and somehow I was always part of the solution, never the problem. Ellis clung to me like a shadow. He looked up to me with eyes that made me forget I was still a kid myself. I helped him study for tests, tied his ties for school pictures, and made sure he didn't hear our parents yelling through the thin walls. Every time I tried to say I needed something space, sleep, peace, I was told to act like the man of the house or stop being selfish. In our home, love was conditional, but duty was not. If I didn't hold the roof up, it would collapse. Even as the debts piled, my parents never learned restraint. They borrowed against credit lines they couldn't repay, bought new furniture we didn't need, and threw Christmas parties that rivaled City Hall events. I once caught my mother using the last of my tutoring money cash I'd secretly put aside for college to buy herself a spa weekend with her sister. When I confronted her, she just laughed and said, "It's not like you were going to use it. College is for people who don't have families to take care of." And when I got that scholarship to Kansas Tech full-ride mechanical engineering, my father looked me dead in the eye and said, "You think a piece of paper's gonna feed this family?" My mother chimed in with her usual venom. "This house runs on your back, not your grades." So I made the hardest choice I've ever made. I joined the Army. Not for glory, not even for escape, but because I needed a way to support Ellis from far away. I could endure whatever training they threw at me. I could bleed and crawl and rebuild myself. What I couldn't do was watch my little brother grow up in that house and become another casualty of our parents' chaos. I didn't tell anyone except Ellis. I just left. The night before I shipped out, I folded my old hoodie and left it on his bed with a note tucked inside, "I'll come back. You just focus on school." I didn't cry when I boarded the bus. I didn't look back at the porch where Dad drank beer and Mom scrolled her phone. I carried one belief with me like armor: if I gave them everything, my effort, my distance, my money, they would finally change. Basic training in El Paso hit me like a wall of bricks. They broke us down to the bone physically, mentally, emotionally, and then built us back up into something unrecognizable. I learned to reload a rifle blindfolded, navigate through the desert with a busted compass, and shut down the parts of me that needed comfort. Pain became routine. Orders were oxygen. But I clung to the letters from Ellis like they were sacred. Every paycheck I got, I wired straight home. 90% to Mom's account. I kept just enough to buy soap socks and the occasional instant noodles when the mess hall food was too awful to stomach. In my letters, I told Ellis to hang in there to keep his head down and study. I pictured him using the money to buy textbooks, prep for college, maybe even have a little freedom I never had. For a while, it felt like I was doing something right. Until Cade, my squad mate and the closest thing I had to a friend, showed me something on his phone one night during deployment. "Aren't these your parents?" he asked, turning the screen. There they were, Dad smiling next to a brand new white SUV, Mom holding a margarita in front of a hotel pool in Las Vegas. Caption, "Living our best lives." I froze. I wanted to believe maybe they won a contest or that it was some Photoshop prank. My throat tightened as Cade added, "They tagged your brother. That your little bro." I nodded numb. I didn't say a word. A week later, I got a letter from Ellis. It was messier than usual, sloppier handwriting. He wrote that he'd started working the evening shift at a fast food place to help cover school supplies and a new laptop because, as he put it, Mom said the money's tight again. I felt something crack in my chest. I'd sent enough to cover his tuition twice over. My hands shook as I read it again and again. They'd used my deployments as an ATM and were letting Ellis hustle late nights in greasy kitchens. But still, I kept wiring the money. I didn't stop, because Ellis was still there. And maybe they'd realize what they were doing and make it right. But the cracks widened. Every time I saw a message from my mom in my inbox, my heart would race. Even Cade noticed. He'd ask if I was okay and I'd shrug it off, pretend it was nothing. What was I supposed to say? I'm afraid to open emails from my mom because I don't know if she's asking for more money or reminding me how little I matter. The insomnia got worse. My hands would twitch at night. I'd replay conversations in my head, my father saying, "Don't forget who puts food on this table," when I was 14 and scraping mold off bread for dinner. My mother scoffing, "You think you're better than us," when I asked to apply for scholarships. One night while we were cleaning weapons under a sky full of stars, Cade looked over and asked, "Do you really think they need you? Or just your paychecks?" I stared at the bolt in my hand, fingers frozen. I didn't know how to answer him, because deep down I already knew. October burned like a furnace in the Middle East, the kind of heat that dried out your throat before you even spoke. I was assigned to lead a convoy of military vehicles carrying medical supplies to a remote clinic. The mission was supposed to be routine, but nothing ever felt routine out there. The air always tasted like metal, like something dangerous was waiting just beyond the next curve. The briefing had been clear the road we'd take had recent chatter about an improvised explosive device, but we had no choice. Supplies had to get through. Civilians depended on them. We mounted up. I checked the tire pressure on my Humvee, ran my fingers across the steering wheel like it could promise me safety. Cade hopped into the passenger seat like he always did, cracking jokes about desert rations. I laughed. I still remember that. The laugh before everything went quiet. We didn't even make it to the halfway mark. There was no warning, just a deafening roar that shattered the windshield and hurled me like a rag doll into the burning sky. My vision blinked into white, then red, then nothing. I could feel myself floating, disconnected. Cade's voice somewhere in the background shouting my name. Then silence. Complete, dead silence. I woke up in a field hospital, swaddled in wires and pain. The nurse didn't sugarcoat it. She told me the blast had taken my left leg below the knee. My world narrowed to a sharp, vibrating point. I tried to ask about Cade, but the way she looked down told me what I needed to know. He didn't make it. Died instantly. They fit me with a temporary prosthetic before I left the hospital. I barely spoke during physical therapy. Every step reminded me that Cade would never take another one. The doctors called it survivor's guilt, said it was normal. I didn't think there was anything normal about waking up screaming in the middle of the night or about hearing phantom gunfire while brushing my teeth. The military discharged me with a permanent disability rating. My final meeting with the captain was sterile polite. They handed me my papers, thanked me for my service, and sent me on my way. No ceremony. No handshake from a superior officer. No flag folded and handed to me with meaning. I called my parents to tell them what happened, to let them know I was coming home. I expected stupidly maybe a moment of human warmth. I got a 2-sentence text from my mother, "Can they fix your leg? Your dad is busy planning the wedding for your cousin." I stared at the screen for an hour, wondering if it was a joke, wondering if I should call back and scream. I didn't. I turned off the phone, packed my bag, and caught the next transport out. There was still a tiny part of me that believed once I got home they'd see me differently, that they'd hug me and say they were proud, that all the sacrifices I'd made, the money I'd sent, the pain I carried meant something. I still wanted to believe I mattered. I took a Greyhound bus back to Wichita Falls, Kansas, sitting in the last row, my new leg cold and awkward beneath my jeans. I watched the planes roll by, thinking about nothing and everything all at once. It was late autumn when I stepped off the bus in Wichita Falls. The air smelled like burning leaves and old pavement. My duffel bag was light, just a few clothes, my papers, and a worn-out photo of me and Ellis when we were kids. No one came to pick me up. I called a cab. When I reached the house on Maple Grove, the porch was strung with balloons and gold streamers. I could hear music inside, laughter, the clink of glasses. I opened the door and walked into a full-blown birthday party. My father's 60th, of course. The room fell quiet when I stepped in. A few relatives glanced my way, startled, then quickly turned their eyes elsewhere. I saw cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, friends of the family I barely remembered. No one said my name. My mother approached, wine glass in hand, her lips tightening as she took me in. She leaned in close, her voice low. "You should have called. Today's not the time. People are here to celebrate. Celebrate what I wanted to ask. The fact that their son came back from a war half a man, that I had dragged myself across sand and fire just to be told I was an inconvenience." I nodded. I found a corner by the coat rack and stood there silent. No one asked me how I was doing. No one looked at the metal limb beneath my jeans. I blended into the wallpaper. My father raised a glass as the music faded. He thanked everyone for coming, for being the people who truly matter. Then he paused, looked around. His eyes found mine. "And to those of us who carry this family, not weigh it down, cheers." My mouth went dry. I saw Ellis shift in his seat, start to rise, but my mother grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. The message was clear: don't make a scene. I stood frozen, my back pressed against the wall, wishing I could vanish into the wood. After the guests thinned out, I found my father in the kitchen pouring himself another drink. I asked him calmly why he had said that, why he would humiliate me like that in front of everyone. He didn't look at me. "You think you're some kind of hero because you got yourself blown up," he said. "You think that gives you the right to walk in here and expect a parade." I took a breath, but before I could answer, he turned to face me fully. "You're not a soldier anymore. You're a cripple. And I'm not running a charity. Get out of my house." He said it like it was nothing, like I was a broken appliance he'd grown tired of. No one stepped in. Not my mother, not my uncles, not even Ellis, who stood in the hallway, eyes wide and trembling but unmoving. I looked at each of them, searching for a reason to stay. There wasn't one. I walked upstairs, grabbed my bag, and took the framed photo of me and Ellis from the shelf. That was all I took. I walked out the door without looking back. That night, I curled up on a bench at the Wichita bus station, my leg aching and my body trembling. But it wasn't the pain that kept me awake. It was the hollow feeling in my chest, the kind that came when you realized you'd been erased from your own family's story. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew this much: I had nothing left to lose. And sometimes that's the most dangerous kind of freedom. 2 days after leaving the house I used to call home, I found myself pacing the sidewalk near a gas station, watching buses come and go. The cold from the concrete seeped into my bones through the aluminum bench, and every breath felt heavier than the last. I hadn't eaten a proper meal since I left. My leg throbbed with every movement, but the ache in my chest made it almost invisible. Then I remembered him, my grandfather, Amos Kane. When I was young, I'd spend entire summers on his corn farm in Hayes. He taught me how to drive a tractor long before I could legally drive a car, and we used to sit on his porch eating peaches from a tin while fireflies lit up the yard. But around the time I turned 15, the letters stopped. My parents told me Grandpa had chosen to cut himself off from the family, that he didn't want visitors. I never questioned it, until now. That night I used the last few dollars I had left to buy a bus ticket north. Hays, Kansas, flat, quiet, and rural. I didn't even know if he still lived in the same place. I didn't know if he'd recognize me. I just knew I had nowhere else to go. When I stepped off the bus, the sky was a dusky orange and the air smelled like earth. The walk to the farm took longer than I remembered. The gravel crunched beneath my boots with every step as the sun dropped behind the horizon. I approached the house like a ghost. I knocked 3 times. It took a minute, but the door opened. He stood there, older than I remembered, his silver beard thicker, his frame slightly stooped. But those eyes hadn't changed. They studied me quietly, carefully, until something flickered in them. He stepped forward, wrapped his arms around me, and didn't say a word. That was all it took. I broke. Years of being the strong one, the steady one, the unshakable one, they all collapsed into that embrace. I sobbed like a child. And still he said nothing. Just held me. When I pulled away, he motioned me inside and poured a mug of coffee, setting it on the table like it was 2005 again. And nothing had ever gone wrong. We didn't speak much that first evening. I sat at the kitchen table, tracing the wood grain with my finger while the quiet buzz of the fridge filled the air. When the food was ready, we ate in near silence. I expected awkwardness, but there was none. Just comfort. After dinner, he finally leaned back in his chair and said, "They told me you didn't want to see me." I froze. "I wrote you letters, sent a birthday card every year until you were 20. Never got a reply. Your father said you refused to talk about me, that you were angry." My throat closed. I didn't know I whispered. He nodded slowly. "They lied then. Makes sense now." He stood up and walked over to a cabinet, pulled out a faded envelope. Inside were documents, all in his neat handwriting. Bank transfers. Legal forms. He explained that years ago my parents had come to him begging for help. Said they were on the verge of losing the house. He emptied out his retirement savings, decades of labor to keep them afloat. They promised they'd pay it back, but they never did, he said, setting the papers in front of me. And then they stopped answering my calls. I couldn't speak. It felt like someone had hit me in the chest with a shovel. Everything they'd taken from me, they'd taken from him first. They forged my signature once, he continued. Transferred the last account I had into your mother's name. Told the rest of the family I'd gone senile. Said I didn't want company. Said I was dangerous. I gripped the edge of the table. Rage coiled up in my spine, but before I could speak, he raised a hand. "I'm not telling you this so you'll hate them. That'll eat you alive. I'm telling you so you know the truth. You weren't forgotten. You were taken." That night I didn't sleep much, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to run anymore. In the morning, I asked him if I could stay, help around the farm, do something that mattered. He nodded once. "This land fed 3 generations. If you want, it can help you heal." I moved into a small room above the old pantry with creaky floors and a window that looked out over the cornfield. The wind whispered through the stalks that night, and it sounded a lot like forgiveness. My days at Amos Corn Farm started early. The light came in through the east-facing window before 6, and the sound of roosters carried through the fields. Grandpa didn't assign me tasks. He just made coffee and left it outside my door in a dented metal mug. I started with small things, pulling weeds, checking irrigation lines, patching broken fence posts. My prosthetic leg made it tough at first. I fell more than once into the dirt, scraping my palms and cursing under my breath. But no one laughed. No one sighed. Grandpa would just glance over, nod, and keep working. At night, though, things got harder. The quiet out here wasn't the same as the quiet of a hospital room. It was deeper, more honest. And with that honesty came the memories, explosions behind my eyelids, Cade's voice echoing in my ears, the weight of a body I couldn't save. One night I woke up screaming. I don't even remember what the dream was. I just remember the cold sweat, the trembling hands, the dread like a knife under my ribs. When I opened the door to breathe, I found Grandpa sitting on the porch. He didn't look at me, just handed me a steaming mug of tea and went back to watching the stars. He never asked what I dreamed about, never told me to toughen up. That silence, his way of just being there, healed something in me I hadn't realized was broken. A few days later, while walking the north field, I saw something glinting in the soil. A piece of rusted wire poking through the dirt. My mind snapped to the battlefield, to the shards of shrapnel, to Cade's hand reaching toward me. My breath caught. I dropped to my knees and couldn't move. I must have stayed there for 10 minutes before Grandpa came by. He didn't say a word, just sat down beside me looking out at the corn. He spoke after a while. Lost a friend in Korea. His name was Clay. Never came home. We didn't need to say anything more. That was the first day I started to feel something close to peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because I wasn't the only one carrying it. I kept working the fields. Started reading about newer irrigation techniques, soil pH balances, moisture sensors. Grandpa let me install a few things, drip systems, remote monitors. The old man grumbled, but I caught him smiling when the first crop came in better than expected. "You're building something here," he said one morning as we walked the fields. "Not just corn, something with your hands, something that lasts." I wasn't sure what he meant then, but I was beginning to understand. When I'd first arrived, I thought the cornfield might be a hiding place, a last resort. But it was becoming something else, an anchor, a rhythm I could follow. A place where I wasn't broken or pitied or used. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Grandpa placed a hand on my shoulder. "This land doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to keep showing up." And for the first time in years, I believed I could. As the fall sun mellowed into golden afternoons, I suggested to Grandpa that we take Kane's corn farm online. He shrugged, at first unconvinced anyone would want to scroll through photos of cornfields. But he gave me a quiet nod, the kind that meant I don't get it, but go ahead. So I set up a social media page, snapped photos of fresh-picked ears in woven baskets, and uploaded a video of Grandpa peeling back husks under the sunset. His weathered hands and soft voice narrated the simple process of harvesting a moment so ordinary yet so honest. Within a week, the video took off. Shares turned into thousands and the comments poured in. People wrote things like, "This reminds me of my granddad and this is what America feels like." Orders came in faster than we could box them corn for roasting bags of kernels, people asking if we shipped across state lines. It didn't take long before I floated the idea to Grandpa. What if we expanded the product line? What if we sold handmade kettle, corn, small batch corn syrup, and maybe even simple cornmeal packs? He tilted his head and said, "You plan it, you run it." So I did. We hired 2 part-timers. Lila was a single mom from town who used to work in a diner that closed during the pandemic. She was sharp, fast, and had the kind of wit that turned mundane packaging days into something like laughter therapy. Finn was a senior at the local agricultural college, always curious, always scribbling notes in a worn notebook, asking Grandpa about irrigation methods from the 60s. We didn't just have a farm anymore. We had a rhythm, a team. One morning, while checking our online inbox, I saw a name that made my heart catch. Ellis. His message was short. "Is this really your farm? I've been watching your videos every day. Are you okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing anything back. The words felt fragile, like they might break something if I wasn't careful. We ended up on the phone that night for over 3 hours. His voice cracked early on. "I knew about the money," he confessed. "I saw them spending it. I should have said something. I didn't know how. There was anger in me, yes. But as I listened, I heard my own 15-year-old voice in his. Afraid. Caught in the same house, the same trap. Blaming him felt like blaming a younger version of myself. So I let the anger go. We talked about everything. About the house. About Cade. About Grandpa's porch and the way the corn rustled in the wind at night. When we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long while, phone still warm in my hand, feeling something close to forgiveness. A week later, a reporter from a regional news station reached out. They'd seen our videos and wanted to feature the veteran rebuilding his life through family farming. I wasn't sure. I didn't want that kind of exposure. Not with Wyatt and Marla still out there lurking. I told Grandpa my concerns. He sipped his coffee, looked at me over the rim of his mug, and said, "If your story helps just one person feel less alone, then it's worth telling." So, I agreed. But on my terms. No full names, no details about my past beyond what I chose to share. I didn't want sympathy. I just wanted to tell the truth that even after war, even after betrayal, a life can still grow one row of corn at a time. That night, as I scheduled the interview, I looked out over the field rows straight and golden under the fading sun. I was beginning to believe that maybe stories like seeds only needed the right soil to take root. It was a brisk morning near the end of harvest season. I was in the warehouse overseeing packaging with Lila and Finn when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. The sound made something in my chest shift. Then came a car door slam. Then two. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Wyatt and Marla walked into the barn like they owned the air. My mother wore a carefully rehearsed smile. My father looked stiff in his 2 new button-down. They approached like we were in the middle of a holiday reunion instead of a working farm. "Look at you," Marla said, pulling me into an unsolicited hug. "This place is beautiful, just beautiful. You've really made something of yourself." Wyatt stepped forward, hand out like the last 2 years had never happened. "We've been thinking," he started. "Maybe it's time we move past old misunderstandings. This farm, it could be even bigger. Nationwide. We could help. Invest." I didn't say anything. They filled the air with empty plans and sweeter-than-honey apologies, speaking of blood ties and family legacy and how no one succeeds alone. Then Grandpa stepped into the barn. He didn't smile, didn't nod. He walked up slow with his spine tall and eyes hard. He looked at Wyatt and said, "You still owe me $64,000, plus interest." Silence. He looked at Marla. "And you signed my name on a bank form you never had permission to touch." Wyatt started to interrupt, mumbling something about healing and moving on. Grandpa didn't flinch. "You don't get to steal, lie, and come back with a handshake. Not here." I turned to them, my voice steady. "I don't have parents. I have a grandfather, a brother, and people who stayed. I don't need anything else." Wyatt's face darkened. "You're still the same ungrateful cripple we tried to help." I didn't answer. I turned back to the boxes and kept working. The silence said more than any words could. Lila and Finn watched the entire exchange. Later, while we sat outside eating lunch under the shade of the grain silo, Lila looked at me and said, "You're not alone in this. Not ever again." A few days later, a customer posted a short blog about what she'd witnessed at the farm. The post went viral, not for the drama but for the message that boundaries are an act of love, sometimes the greatest kind. I didn't read the comments, but I saw the numbers climb. Orders surged again. People sent letters, veterans, survivors, people like me, people who thought they were alone in their own stories. One evening, as the sun lowered itself behind the hills and cast long golden shadows across the field, I walked out past the fence line and stared out at the corn. I thought of Cade, of Ellis, of Grandpa's hands, of my own hands, once trembling, now steady. I thought of everything it had taken to get here, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at them. Not even at myself. I had paid the price. Now I was free. After I turned my back on Wyatt and Marla in the barn, I thought that would be the end of it. I believed silence could seal the door on that part of my life. But life had a way of echoing louder than I expected. Someone, maybe a tourist, maybe a neighbor, had filmed the confrontation and posted it online. No dramatic music, no editing, just raw footage, my mother's outstretched arms, my father's scowl, my refusal. The video went viral. Again. This time it wasn't just about cornfields and rebuilding. Local papers ran headlines like "Veteran Farmer Confronts the Past on His Own Soil." Veteran blogs reposted it with captions like, "He didn't just survive war, he survived home." And while Kane's Corn saw a surge of new followers, orders, and letters of support, the old lies my parents had once told began to unravel. Someone who claimed to be Wyatt's cousin wrote a long post exposing how he'd borrowed money years ago and ghosted the family. A childhood friend messaged me privately. "Your mom used to tell everyone you ran away because you were ashamed of being an amputee." I believed her. I'm sorry. The truths they'd buried were surfacing one by one like seeds left too long in the dark, finally cracking open. A few days later, Grandpa found an envelope in our mailbox. No return address, but we both knew who it was from. Inside was a letter. Marla had written to Grandpa, not to me. She didn't mention my name once. Instead, she asked him to please consider removing the video. It's damaging to our family's reputation. She wrote that she was worried about how people might perceive us and that everyone deserves a chance to move on. Grandpa said nothing. He placed the letter on the kitchen table, slid it toward me, and walked out onto the porch. I read it once, then again. I didn't feel the urge to cry or yell. I felt quiet. That night I sat at my desk and wrote a reply not to send, just for myself. I forgive you. Not because you asked, not because you deserve it. I forgive you because I won't let you break what's left of me. But I won't ever let you back in. I folded the note and tucked it into the drawer beneath my tools. A silent closure. A private line drawn in permanent ink. Ellis and I decided to do something with the attention we were getting. We organized a fundraiser at the farm benefiting veterans with PTSD. We built a makeshift stage, set up tents, and decorated the place with strings of lanterns. Lila baked corn muffins. Finn gathered local sponsors. We shared our stories, not to shame anyone, not to relive the pain, but to show others that surviving betrayal didn't have to be the end, that it could be the beginning. As night fell, everyone gathered in the field. Each guest lit a lantern, and one by one we released them into the air. A hush came over the crowd as the sky filled with flickering gold. I stood still watching them rise. I thought of Cade, of his laugh, his silence, his broken edges that mirrored mine. I imagined him watching too, not angry anymore. Just peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel haunted. I felt whole. A year passed. Kane's Corn now had 2 additional fields. We had a booth at the Kansas City Farmers Market and a website selling handcrafted corn goods nationwide. Our logo, 2 hands holding a single ear of corn, was stamped on every bag. Lila ran the production side like a storm of efficiency. Finn handled logistics, turning spreadsheets into poetry. Ellis and I shared everything else, marketing, finances, dreaming big. One day a local high school reached out. They asked if they could bring students to tour the farm, learn about soil and sustainability. Another week, a group of veterans emailed asking to volunteer during harvest. We don't have a farm, one wrote, but we've got time and we've got stories. The farm stopped being just a place to grow corn. It became a space to grow people too. Then Ellis made a decision I didn't expect. He turned down a corporate job in Kansas City, one that offered benefits, bonuses, and a corner office. He walked into the kitchen that morning with his usual cup of black coffee and said, "I'm staying." When I asked why, he looked at me and smiled. "I don't want to make someone else rich. I want to build something that means something with you." We laughed, shook on it, and that afternoon filed for a joint patent on our signature product, naturally fermented corn syrup, the first in our legacy line. Still, not everything was easy. There were nights I woke gasping, drenched in sweat, Cade's voice caught in my chest. There were moments when the memory of my father's eyes, full of disgust, stole the air from my lungs. But those nights came less and less, and when I opened my eyes, I wasn't alone. There was light, the scent of fresh coffee, laughter from the porch. I was no longer surviving. I was living. Family, I learned, isn't a title you're born into. It's a choice you make. It's Grandpa Amos, whose silence always meant strength. It's Ellis, who left and came back whole. It's Lila and Finn, who stayed through every storm. It's the veterans who pulled weeds and shared stories while the sun burned their backs. It's the kids who visited the farm and said they wanted to grow up to be like us. I had a wooden sign made and nailed it to the post at the start of the gravel road. It read, "Kane's Corn, where no one is a burden." One evening just before sunset, I stood in the field. The wind moved through the stalks like a whisper. I closed my eyes. No more running. No more proving. I was here. I was whole. And I had come home on my own terms.